If I said Justin Fields is going to wind up being an NFL MVP on a team other than the Bears, is that an overreaction?
No, I think he's got the skill set for it. I mean, we've seen quarterbacks who are dual threat quarterbacks have a really good chance to win MVP when their teams have success. So if he goes somewhere, lands in a situation where he plays for a playoff team, a contending team, has a big year with his arm and with his legs, he fits that description, he fits that bill, and I think he'll be somebody we talk about in those conversations if he ever ends up in a situation that's better than the one he has spent his first 3 years in.
Well, in which almost anything would be,
that's not
to be
hard.
fair. But the reason this comes up, obviously, for those of you who are just starting to get yourself towards the draft here, is because the top quarterback prospect, the top prospect in this draft by far is Caleb Williams. Everyone has him going number one in their mock draft. And the Bears, of course, are the team that has the number one pick. The Commanders have the second overall pick, and they caused quite the stir when they hired one of Caleb's USC coaches, Cliff Kingsbury, to be their offensive coordinator. Even our own Adam Schefter, who's not one to speculate, tweeted, "Let the speculation begin." Cliff Kingsbury coached Caleb Williams last season. Williams was a standout quarterback at Gonzaga High School in Washington. The Commanders hold the number 2 overall pick. They are in striking distance of the number 1 pick that belongs to Chicago. And Caleb, while maintaining some degree of plausible deniability, did post this congratulations to Kingsbury, and notably Kingsbury not wearing a USC shirt in the picture, but wearing a Washington shirt. In the meantime, Williams' former head coach at USC is Lincoln Riley. He was on with McAfee yesterday saying a lot of teams have reached out to him.
We've talked to quite a few already. I think, people see the talent on the field. I think they're wanting to know about the guy, in the meeting room. They're wanting to know about the guy in the locker room, the type of leader he is. It would be awesome to see him reunite with Cliff, certainly in Washington, but we know there's a lot of things out of control and a lot of things that'll transpire between now and then.
All right, so Lewis, as you and I sort of begin in earnest our preparations for Detroit at the end of April, there are so many pieces to all of this. Let's focus in on the very top of the draft. The Bears have the first pick. The Washington Commanders have the second. All of these signs that seem to be moving Caleb Williams towards number 2, but the Bears will have to play along with that. Give us right now the read on Caleb Williams and the situation he sits in.
Look, I mean, Chicago has a very unique, decision to make. And when you're talking about Washington, you're just hoping that somehow, some way, you can kind of like maintain all of your draft capital. And, actually, there's no way you're going to be able to maintain your draft capital. If you want him, even if Chicago doesn't want him, you're going to have to move to number 1 to assure yourself that you would get him, because someone else will try and come there to get him as well. And I understand why you would try and move for a young man like Caleb Williams, in particular Washington, to assure themselves that they would get him. And that's because, look, the guy truly, from a passing the football perspective, from an off-schedule playmaking perspective, from a running perspective, I watched this young man do some things where you're sitting there and you're going, look, he has some of that kind of pocket presence, foot quickness, arm talent, and then speed that goes above and beyond what Patrick can do. Okay? I'm talking about pure open field running ability and speed. And he has some of the same natural passing characteristics that Patrick has. So if you're sitting there and you're Washington and you have Cliff Kingsbury, and Caleb is from the area, and he has a great relationship with Cliff already, and he's tweeting out, and rather he's putting on Instagram, my dog. I mean, come on, don't overthink some things here. This is, football, we overthink a lot of things with football. Like I said, we twist ourselves up a lot of times trying to get to a conclusion that we know ain't the right conclusion. The right conclusion for Washington is do what you got to do to get this guy on your football team, because nobody in your organization, and I mean nobody, knows Caleb like Cliff Kingsbury does. So you don't have to call Lincoln. You don't have to call anybody. Right. Just ask the guy who's now in your building. And if he gives him the stamp of approval, then you move heaven and earth to try and get in position to draft him, because you ain't going nowhere with the people you got. Nowhere. Make it happen.
So that becomes an interesting piece of this. There were 2 trains running on parallel tracks with this, Jeff, and we discussed this yesterday. One of them is Washington's desire to get Caleb Williams, and again, the Bears have to play ball. One of the things that could play into that is if Caleb Williams really wants that. Now, we haven't heard him say that specifically.
We have not. But
there have been things his father has talked about, wanting control of his situation. That was before the draft order was decided. And what Caleb Williams is he is the first generational prospect of the NIL era, Jeff.
Yeah.
He's the first one that we've seen on commercials.
Right.
He's in the Heisman House commercials. He's in the Dr. Pepper commercials. He's doing just fine, even without jumping to the NFL. So he has leverage if he wants to exercise it.
Yeah, if you're Chicago, you make him say no. I mean, if everyone's moving heaven and earth to come get the guy that you're in that spot, and you feel like you need a guy, then you make him tell you no. You don't do, there's no, I'm letting you go flirt with Washington, I'm letting you go do whatever. You are going to be a Bear. And unless we say you're not going, that's what you're going to have to do. And so I think when you're Chicago, you force him to say no to you before you get to this conversation about can he go become, the Washington quarterback with Kingsbury and his coaching staff or whatever it is. You don't care. You don't care what's behind you because you got the lead position.
Well, and Dan, the big social event is about to happen, right? You're going to the Super Bowl, and that'll be fun. But then 2 weeks after that is the combine.
Yeah.
And that's where this stuff happens.
It is, and that's where it happened last year. That's where the conversations happened that resulted in the Bears trading the 1 pick to Carolina. They had conversations with a lot of different teams there, and that's the deal they came up with that they liked the best. So this is in motion. Look, I mean, Lincoln Riley's saying they're already hearing from teams, right? If the Bears want Caleb Williams, Lincoln Riley probably knows that, right? And so he says it would be great to reunite him with Cliff, but there's other things that have to happen. Like, you talk about moving heaven and earth if you're Washington to get there. It is possible that they can't, right? We go back 4 years ago to the Bengals having the 1 pick and Joe Burrow coming out. And there were teams that were trying to move up, that were offering a lot. Hey, you can get all these extra picks, move back a couple spots, take a quarterback, and also build around him. The Bengals said flatly no to all of it because they felt like Burrow was the guy that was going to change everything for their franchise. And they were right.
Yep.
And if that's the case for Chicago, then they stand pat and they take their guy.
Lewis, go.
The only thing I would say to that, Dan, and I agree with you, bro. I agree with you. The only thing I would say to that, though, is this. In Chicago, right, how can you possibly say in one breath everything surrounding a quarterback helps dictate his future? And I'm not saying you're saying this. I'm just saying overall. How can you say that in one breath and then think that Justin Fields has had any shot at all
Amen.
to reach his potential? You know what I mean? And since he wasn't in that situation, they didn't have a Justin Fields sitting there that they actively screwed up.
Yeah.
Okay, they didn't have that dude. And see, that's the only kind of fly in the ointment of what seems like the obvious for many people, which is Chicago, just go ahead and draft Caleb. I mean, they worked actively. They tried real hard to screw up Justin Fields.
Yeah,
They
absolutely.
really did.
And so
the worst thing you want if you're Chicago is for him to go somewhere else.
So let me ask you this, because we're going to get into the Justin Fields of it all in a minute. But so there are three things that are happening at the same time. The Bears could stick with Fields, which it doesn't seem like they're inclined to do, but that's one option. They could just take Caleb Williams, which I think is ultimately what's going to happen. The third option is you let Washington have him because you believe that Drake Maye or Jayden Daniels plus whatever Washington would have to give you, Lewis, maybe it's a #1 pick next year or something else, is worth moving down a spot for. I know the evaluations are just beginning, but is your sense that those other two quarterbacks in this draft are that close to Caleb?
No, absolutely not. And I'll tell you what, Jayden Daniels is a freak show now in terms of his ability to make plays. He is fun. He is fun to watch. And look, there's a reason why he's a Heisman Trophy winner. But Caleb is different. Caleb's different. Look, I think what would separate, like, see, for me, what's going to be interesting here is when eventually we get further down the road and I get more information about what is Jayden like, the person, the student, the teammate in relationship to Drake Maye. Because as far as Jayden Williams being a playmaker, or Jayden Daniels being a playmaker, and what he can do at the quarterback position compared to Drake Maye, if I didn't know anything else about them, nothing, it's Jayden Daniels all day long for me. All day. There's a gap from Caleb to Jayden, and then there's a gap to me from Jayden to Drake Maye. So I'll tell you, this is going to be very, very interesting. But Caleb is definitely, there's a gap, a significant gap.
And that's the key point, right? Because you talk about Justin Fields, and maybe he never had a chance in Chicago. He was the 4th quarterback taken in his own draft. Like,
Right.
we weren't talking about him as a prospect the way that we're talking about Caleb Williams. And if you're Chicago and you think Caleb really is that guy, then I think it becomes an easy decision.
Justin did have 2 superstar receivers when he was at Ohio State, and so does Jayden Daniels. He has 2 receivers who are going to go in the first round of this coming NFL draft. We're back on Get Up, where Justin Fields' future continues to be an interesting topic. In fact, it took center stage at the Super Bowl last night. George Kittle grew up a Bears fan, and he weighed in on the Bears quarterback situation at media night. Listen.
I think what the Bears should do is, personally, I think they should trade back as many picks as they can and build around a guy that they've been trying to build around. Give the guy some actual options. I mean, he has options, but just help him out as much as you possibly can be. Build him up as big as you can and trust the kid.
George, I mean, there's a seat right here for you. I mean,
love
George,
it.
right? Stepping directly into the media. Is he right?
He's right. I've said this forever. Yeah, he's 100% right. I mean, go load up your team, whether it's Harrison, whoever you think is up there. Go get a bunch of picks behind them. Develop this thing around Justin Fields and what you thought he was going to be when you first brought him in. Because I can assure you, a lot of what you did contributed to what you've seen on the field. So let's improve that. Let's get the right guys around him, and let's go accelerate the process for him.
Lewis?
I'm with Jeff on this one. Look, and Dan, again, I just love this debate, right? So earlier we talked about, the fact that he was, the 4th quarterback taken in his draft class. The guy who right now we're already putting on Mount Rushmore, like the actual Mount Rushmore, not even the football Mount Rushmore, but the actual one, in Patrick Mahomes. Yeah. He was the 10th overall pick in his draft class.
Right.
And Andy had to move up to come get him, right? So people weren't necessarily sold that he was going to be the best guy in his draft class either. And you know why a lot of the reason why he's become what he's become is because he wasn't set up to fail.
Yep.
A lot of it has to do with that. Now, that is not taking anything away from Patrick's unique abilities, because we've talked about him. We can talk about him for days. If Patrick would have gone to Chicago and had the kind of turnover and turmoil that Justin Fields has, are we so sure we'd be seeing this version of Patrick Mahomes right now? Are we so sure of that? You know what I'm saying? But see, we never want to go down that road, really. We never do. We always just want to say, this guy sucks or he's great. And we forget all of the gray area in between. You either suck or you're a Hall of Famer. So just tell me which one you're going to be.
But this entire discussion lives in gray area, and that's what makes it good, right? We're not saying Justin Fields sucks or he's great or he'll never be great. What we're saying is this. The Bears have had 3 years. The current Bears administration has had 2 years to evaluate Justin Fields, what they think of him as a prospect, where they think he can take them. If they evaluate that and they evaluate Caleb Williams and they like Caleb Williams better and they factor in, as you know they will, that for the next 4 years he's also going to be cheaper, then I think it becomes a no-brainer. And I don't think that's an insult to Justin Fields. If you're saying this guy, Caleb Williams, we think has more ability to elevate us to where we want to be, then I think you have to do it, especially when you factor in the contract, because you're not talking about keep Justin Fields or trade Justin Fields. You're talking about trade Justin Fields or extend Justin Fields, and I think that's another leap beyond where the discussion is right now.
Quickly, Lou, go ahead.
And you know what? No, and I've said numerous times, look, Chicago has information that none of us have about Justin Fields, good and bad. So they will make a more informed decision than any of us can make sitting here right now talking about it, whether or not we're for them keeping him or we're for them trading him. So I'm with you there, man. And what I'm doing is I'm just echoing what you said, which is Chicago knows, I think they've had 2 years under the current regime to evaluate Justin Fields. So they know some things that we don't. And I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying they do. So I'll trust whatever they do.
Yeah.
I'm just saying from the outside looking in and knowing what I know about him from regimes that have coached him before, I hate to see them throw the flag, or rather throwing the towel on the kid because he hasn't had a shot, really.
Yeah. That's okay. He'll wind up in Jeff's hometown in Atlanta down there. And he'll wind up setting the league on fire playing for Raheem Morris. You watch.
Yeah.
That's his hometown, too.
That's what.
Come on home, baby.
Justin Fields is going to wind up as big a winner in all of this as anybody else.